Welcome everyone and thanks for joining. What we are going to cover today is going to be very exciting. It's Lambda functions in Excel. Now, what does Lambda function in Excel mean? These are functions which help you create your own functions. So we've used functions like SumFS, VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP. These have been created by Microsoft. But what Lambda does, it gives you the power to create the functions that you want with the kind of logic that you want in them, and then others can use it. Of course, when I say others can use it, it doesn't mean that it's available to everybody in the world, but whoever has access to that file can use those functions. That's not just the reason why I'm doing this session, so that you can learn to create your own functions and let people use it. Lambda is the bedrock for many modern Excel functions like by row, by call, scan, map, reduce, and a few more. Now, these functions are changing the way people use Excel, and understanding of Lambda is essential. In this ongoing series, I want to cover each of these functions in the next few weeks. So, therefore, I thought let's start with Lambda so that you have the fundamentals, you have the basic concept, and as we cover those, you'll be at ease and you'll only need to learn what is specific to that function. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at 4 examples. Now, if some of you have already downloaded the worksheet, you'll say, hey, we see only 3, but I'll make it 4. We'll do something extra and we will understand how do we use the Lambda function. All right. We'll start simple, and as we move forward, we'll make it slightly more advanced so that we can understand and appreciate the total depth of Lambda functions. So I'm going to start with a very basic one. And in case you are interested in participating along, go to the description and you have the link of this file. You can download it and practice along. And if you want to just enjoy and learn right now, you can do that. This session is going to be available later as well. You can download the file, try and come back to it in case you want to see what we did in the session. All right. So let me share my screen very quickly and then we'll get going. If you can give me a thumbs up whether my screen is visible. All right, thank you. Let's begin. All right, we have a simple Excel sheet here where we have a few names, people who've taken loans, what's the interest rate, and for how many years they've taken. And what we want to do is calculate simple interest. Now, calculating simple interest is not such a complex thing. And that's the reason I picked this example, so that we can understand without getting too worried about the complexity of the solution that we are trying to figure out. If I were to calculate simple interest, it's simple, principal, interest, and time, and I get the simple interest. For 20,000, 3 years, 6% interest, it is 3,600, fairly easy. However, instead of doing this calculation directly, let's look at how do we create a function of our own, which we will call simple interest, and do this calculation. Okay. So I'm going to delete this and I'm going to start writing Lambda. Lambda helps us define our own functions. Now, Lambda has one parameter which says parameter or calculations. And as I provide this, it'll keep saying parameter or calculations. What does this mean? You first define a set of parameters and then you define a calculation. Each Lambda must have one parameter. Obviously, you'll need to give it some input for it to do some calculation. So I'm going to give my parameter name as P, R, P, R, T. P stands for principal, R stands for rate, and T stands for the time. All right. And now I'm going to give it the calculation. Now I've given 3 parameters and now I'll give it the calculation. Now, how does Lambda understand what is parameter and what is calculation? Obviously, right now we've given some variable names, P, R, and T. As soon as we write some operation, it'll understand that that's the calculation. And Let's write the calculation. Calculation is not very complex. P multiplied by R multiplied by T. And I will close the bracket. Now, we will expect some kind of a result as we do this. And the result that we look at is slightly surprising when we are learning Lambda for the first time. It'll give us an error. Now, why is it giving an error? Because we've only defined the function. We've not really given it any parameters. We've not given it the value 20,000, 6%, or 3 years. Therefore, there is an error. Now, I have a choice here. One choice is I can first test whether my function is working correctly. That's choice one. Or my second choice is I can now complete the function creation. It's a simple function. It's not very complex. I can create the function, but let's understand how do we test whether it's working fine or not. I'm again going to go into the editing mode, go right till the end of the function and open another bracket. And I'm going to provide some parameters. So it expects P, R, and T in that order. So I will provide the principal, I will provide the rate, and I will provide the time. And I'll close the bracket. Now this is just testing. This is just testing whether our function is working fine or not. And as I do that, I see that I'm getting the correct answer. Now I'm convinced that my function is right, and I will now complete the function definition. I'll go back and I will delete this testing part. I don't need it any further. This entire formula I'm going to copy. So I'm going to copy this, Control C, Command C, depending on what platform you're using, enter, and I'm going to go to formulas and define a name. I'm going to give a name of my choice. I'm going to call it simple interest, and in refers to, I'm going to paste the formula that I had copy pasted, and I'll press OK. Now the function definition is complete. I'm going to delete this and I'm going to say simple interest. And as I start typing, I see my function definition is there. This is the function that we have just created. It works exactly like the others. I'm going to press tab and it gives me the formula PRT. I could have even given the names as principal, rate, time. Because it's simple interest, usually people understand what is PRT. That's why I've used the common notation. Now, before we proceed further, I always recommend that you give good names so that it's easier for anybody using that function to understand what's the real input that we need to provide. So for P, I will provide this amount. For R, which is rate, I will provide this amount. And for time, which is years usually, I'm going to provide D2. Close the bracket and I get the answer. Now I can copy this function and it will calculate simple interest for all my rows. All right. Now we've used a very simplistic example, and obviously for such a simple example, creating a lambda is a bit of an overcomplication. But I have done this so that you are not too bothered by what's the logic we are building, but you understand the process. So let's understand the process once again very quickly. We define a lambda. We start by defining all the parameters that we need, and then we write the function, what's the calculation that we need to provide, and copy that and put it in name manager and give it a name. All right. Now, simple interest is a simpler thing to calculate, but what if this was compound interest? In addition to this, we would need one more element, which is the number of intervals in which you will be compounding it, once, twice, or thrice, or four, or number of times that you'll be compounding in an interest. So let's say I create two more columns and I say compound interest. Okay, let's just write the compound interest formula to understand how that works. Now that formula is slightly complex. Some of you will go back to your school days. It's principal into bracket start 1 plus rate divided by number of intervals. Sorry, I should have written this here. And let me also define the number of intervals. I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm going to say one interval compounded annually. So I'll rewrite the formula. Principal into 1 plus rate divided by number of intervals. And now this we raise the power to interval into time frame. Now, I'm not sure how many of you remember this formula, but every time I have to use it, I end up searching for this formula. I don't remember it at the, I don't recall it immediately. When I calculate, I get the answer 23,820. Obviously, it's slightly more than, and this is the formula for amount, okay? Amount, not just the interest. Obviously, this is slightly more than 3,600, 3,820 because compound interest, you will get the benefit of every year compounding. Now, if I were to write this formula every time, as I said, I have to search for it. Now, if this was a computation that I would expect people in my office to be doing, it'll be unfair for me to expect that everybody else will remember it absolutely fine because it's a slightly complex formula. So what I will do is I'll make it simple for them by saying, let's create a Lambda. I know between the first example and now a lot of people have joined in. So if you've joined in, don't worry, you've not missed much. I'm going to do a demonstration using this second example of how do you create your own function. So if you've joined in, don't feel that you've missed out. Follow this example and you'll know that how do you create a function of your own definition using Lambda. So I have just shown a simple calculation of calculating a compound interest. Now, if I were to do this using Lambda, where we'll create a function so that instead of writing this complex function every time, I have a simpler function to write. And not just me, anybody else working with me collaboratively on that sheet can also use that function and it becomes simple for all of us. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this. Let me reduce this slightly and start writing the Lambda function. So Lambda, once again, Lambda expects a set of parameters followed by a calculation. Because you're defining your own function, of course, there's going to be a calculation. When people provide you inputs, what's the output you require? And if there's going to be calculation, of course, there are going to be some set of parameters which they need to provide. So with that simple logic, it is mandatory to give at least one parameter to Lambda for it to perform some operation. Because we are calculating the amount after compound interest, we need to give a lot of parameters. The first one is called principal. I will use P for short, which is a generally accepted term in the mathematics language for compound interest. I will use R, which is column C for rate of interest. Then number of intervals, which is column F. I'll use N. That's the standard definition we have. And then T is the number of years, which is in column T. Now I have defined all the variables. I need to give the calculation now. So I will now define the calculation using this. So my calculation is principal into bracket open 1 plus R divided by N bracket close raised to the power of N into T. Close the bracket for N into T and close the bracket for Lambda, and I'll press enter. It gives an error because we've just done the definition. We've not really provided it any parameters. Once you've done this definition, the next step is copy the entire formula, Control C, Command C, depending on what you're using. Go to formulas bar, name manager, create a new name, and I'm going to call it compound interest. It follows all the principles of defining a name, no spaces in it. You can have underscores if you want. And I'm going to say, paste the formula here. Okay, close, and I'm going to delete this. We don't need this now because we have created a name called compound interest. As I start typing, I see compound interest highlight available for me in the IntelliSense. Like other functions, as I bring my cursor over it, press tab, I get the function with the bracket open, and instead of I'll now provide inputs for P, R, and T. P, comma, R, comma. Remember, N is the number of times you want to compound, and T is the number of years. Now, instead of writing that complex formula, writing this is easier. So if you have a lot of people in your team, and when you are working in a team setup, not everybody has similar level of knowledge in Excel. Some people do very well, some people are very comfortable with it, some people not so much. And we don't want that to become a challenge for them. So we can create something simple for them to use so that they can do their work independently rather than depending on others in the team every time to help them with the formulas. This appears to be fairly simple and we get the result. And of course, it works like all other functions. You can copy, you can drag. And if I can pick up this formatting and do this, obviously this looks slightly more readable. All right. So that's how you create your own function. Now we're going to look at two more examples. One will be again a simple Lambda function. And then we will jump into something which is called recursive Lambda. That is extremely powerful, and you'll see why Lambda became such a popular thing, because it helps you do repeated calculations. But first, let's stick to a very simple example. And this example, I've taken inspiration from my time in Ernst& Young when I used to work there. Now, a little bit sidebar to give you the context. So when you work in any company which does audits, like all the big fours, there are restrictions on what kind of investments you can do on a personal basis. Simple reason is, if you're auditing a client, you know everything about them, and you're not allowed to make investments in that organization because you have insider information and you can gain an unfair advantage by taking calls whether when to invest and when to move out of the investments that you have. So there are restrictions. So every time you have to go and search for the investment in the system whether you are allowed or not. Okay, with that background, I built this example to replicate that. Of course, there is a web-based system which works beautifully, but what if we were to do this on Excel? Now, let's say these are the list of approved investments. Now, there are many of these. Okay. And some of the investments that you've shortlisted along with your investment manager, these are the ISIN numbers. ISIN number is a unique number that each investment has. Okay. And what you want to do is quickly check whether this investment is allowed or not. Okay. What we will do is we will first check this using a simple formula, and then I will show you a method to convert that easily into Lambda. So far, while we've been writing Lambda because we were trying to understand, we were writing Lambda from scratch. We had cleared everything and we wrote Lambda from scratch. But now we're going to look at how do we create that in a slightly easier way. So the function that I'm going to use is XLOOKUP. I'm sure many of you are familiar with XLOOKUP. So first thing that XLOOKUP expects, first parameter is lookup value. I'm going to say this is the investment. Please check whether I can return this. Whether I can invest in this or not. Then it'll say lookup array. What is the lookup array? List of all the approved investments. So I will select. Now it says return array. We don't have anything to return. So I'm just going to return exactly the same value that we look for, and my return array is also going to be the same, and I'm going to close my bracket. Now this is a Mac bug. Don't worry why the result is not displayed. I'm going to go to another tab and come back and the result will be there. This is a known Mac bug. Don't worry about it. Obviously, the approved investment is the first one in the list. That is why it is resulting here. But if I copy this function, I don't get some of these investments, the third investment and the fifth investment. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change some of the formula. The first thing I'm going to say is if my investment is in the approved investment list, I don't want to see the investment number again because it's not intuitive. So I'm going to say, I'm going to add an if statement. If whatever XLOOKUP returns is equal to this value, then I'm going to say investment is approved, or maybe slightly better, investment product is approved. And I'm going to close my if statement. Now it gives me a much better response. Investment product is approved. This is intuitive. This is action oriented for me to know that, okay, I can invest in this instrument. But it still doesn't solve the problem if I get an error. Now, you can say you can provide value if false. That won't work because we're going to get an error, and value if false will not work in case of error. So before this if, I'm going to say if error, and that's where I'll capture, and I will say, I'll go to the end and I'll say if error, investment product not approved. Okay, close the if error and finish the function. Now if I copy, you'll see for number 3, I'm getting this answer, investment product not approved. Now this is clear, I cannot invest. Now that we've understood this, now let's convert this into a Lambda. Now this time I'm not going to delete the logic that I have written. I'm just going to go there after the equal to, I'm going to say Lambda and I'll say tab. Now I will provide my parameters. So what are the parameters? The first one is I'm going to say INV prod, that means investment product. And second is APP prod, which is approved product, comma, and I'm going to leave the formula as it is. Now I will change the values that I have here. Okay. C2 is the investment product. So I'm going to say INV prod, and see, I'm defining, and even, I mean, I'm not pressed enter yet, but this INV prod is still available in the IntelliSense. So I'm going to say INV prod here. A2 to A101 is approved products. And again, I have this A2 to A101. So I'm going to replace that by approved product. And finally, I'm going to remove this C2 and replace it by INV prod. Now, without writing the entire formula, I have done the replacement here. I really prefer this method because it just makes it easier for us to create a Lambda. However, if you feel, no, this is confusing, I might as well delete everything and do it from scratch, choice is yours. Press enter and it says, oh, I haven't put a bracket in the end for Lambda. It is prompting me, do you want to add a bracket in the end? I'll accept the suggestion. And again, I get the calc error because I haven't provided any parameters. So Control C, Command C, depending on what you're using, formulas, name manager, new name, and I'm going to call this can invest. I'm going to call this function can invest and paste the formula. Press OK, and I'm done. Now, as I type can invest, it says give me the investment. We'll say this is the product you need to check for, and give me the approved list. This is what you need to check for, close bracket, enter, and it says investment product is approved. Just like the other functions, if I copy, it works, and number 3 and number 5 are not approved, which we had seen earlier. All right. So that's how Lambdas work. I'm going to take a pause. If there are any questions, please drop them in the chat. Let's answer those before we move on to our last example on recursive Lambda. While you are putting your questions, if you have any, for those who joined us later, I'm just going to repeat this, that this is not the only um, use of Lambda. Lambda is used in a lot of modern functions like map, reduce, bycall, byrow, scan, and we're going to cover these in this series in the upcoming weeks. That's why I'm covering Lambda first, so that if you are comfortable with Lambda, when we move on to those functions, you don't have to worry about what's this new Lambda, and I don't want to make it too complex at that time. Let's learn this, practice this, and then we are going to move on to the other functions. All right. So I think yes, Nischay insider trading. Okay, great. I'm seeing some of the messages have just loaded for me, so sorry for not acknowledging, but very nice to have all of you here. Great. Uh, so the Lambda is same as Lambda function used in AWS. I am afraid I have not worked on AWS, so I won't be able to answer that question. But if in AWS use of Lambda is for creating other function, then it is similar. You know, I really like your name, Small Talks with AI. It's a big formula, but it's really good. Yes, it is a big formula, but now I hope you can appreciate. Now, as I said, I don't know whether you were there when I said this. Sometimes when you're working in a team, not everybody has similar level of skills like that one or two people have in the team while working with Excel. If and I'm sure since you're attending this, I'm sure your skills are already up there, or you want them to be up there. You can create such functions and let your team members use much simpler functions rather than writing long functions or even copying them. Sometimes it confuses them that why do I, how do I copy this big function? This is too much for me. It can be intimidating. So yes, it was a long function, but when you look at it, it is a small function here when you actually start using. Nischay, will we learn regex as well? Yes, with a caution, regex can be very demanding. So maybe I'll do more than one session for regex, but all this in the coming weeks. And I don't want to do a session next week because I know next week is the FIFA final, and many of the people will be distracted because they'll be making plans with their friends to watch it together. But after the next week's gap, we're going to resume these sessions. All right. Okay. Thanks, Sudhi, for confirming. Excellent. Let's move on. Let's move on to our last example. Okay. Now, what is this example? We have a very simple phrase in English and we need to convert this into Greek. Okay. Now, what's the inspiration for this example? This is an inspiration where I was working with an airlines company, not as an employee, but as a consultant, where, you know, how are airlines routes, they are defined by the airport codes. So, for example, DEL for Delhi, JFK for the JFK airport, LAX for Los Angeles, DBX for Dubai. So, in a lot of their data, sometimes it was Delhi, Mumbai, sometimes it was DEL, BOM. That's the short form for Mumbai. So they had many representations. So they wanted to convert their entire data in one standard format of the call sign of the airport. Okay. Now, because there were so many replacements, what people were doing they were doing find and replace. This tool, edit, find and find and replace. They were working with this tool several times and they were making this calculation. All right. This is now a manual process, and can be time consuming because it's not just one city. You can imagine, this is I don't want to take the name. This is one of the largest airlines in the country, and they operated their fleet in hundreds of cities. Now, for each city, even if there were three variants or four variants, that makes it 400 times find and replace, which is painful. So, for that, you can create a table like this and you can create a lambda. Now, because there were that same operation was being applied multiple times, this becomes a case for recursive lambda. What is recursion? Recursion is when you call a function multiple times. And that's what recursive lambda is. The function that you define, you call it multiple times. Okay. So for this phrase, we will need to call it four times. Once to convert 1 into alpha, 3 into gamma, 9 into theta, and 7 into zeta. So we need to call it four times. So it is a recursive function. In all these cases, we'll have to call it four times. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to write one function so that through that one function, it converts the entire phrase into Greek. What's the base function that we are going to use? We are going to use substitute. I'm just going to show you one example and then we'll jump into lambda. So let's say if I have to convert this phrase, which is the same as the first one, into Greek, I will say substitute. This is the text. What is the old text? 1 in English. What is the new text? Alpha in Greek. So this phrase becomes alpha 397. Now when I copy alpha 397, alpha gamma 97, alpha gamma 97, and till I reach 7, alpha gamma 9 zeta, and alpha gamma theta zeta. So this, I had to perform this operation 9 times. Not the best way. So I'm going to write a recursive lambda. So I'm going to say lambda, and what are the parameters? The first parameter is called phrase. This is the phrase that I have. Second parameter I'll call English, the English word that I have. The third parameter I'll call Greek. Okay. Now I'll define the function. Now, recursive parameters, there are two deviations from the normal lambda functions. Okay. Let's understand them logically, why there are these two deviations. What does a recursive function do? Call itself. Now, recursive function, if it starts calling itself, it will get into an endless loop, continuously calling itself, and the function will never complete. Simple logic. So what we need to do is we need to start with an exit criteria. When should the recursive function stop calling itself? So that's the first thing we need to do. If, it's always an if because there's a breaking condition. Phrase. If English is equal to blank, it will go through all these, and when it reaches the blank, that means it has gone through all the iteration. If English is equal to blank, you return the phrase. All right. If English is equal to blank, you return the phrase. If not, then what you need to do is you need to call the function. And this is where the second deviation comes in. Usually we give the function name when we go to name manager. But in recursive function, because we are going to call itself, we need to give the name here first. So let's call it pass key. So I'm going to call it pass key, and I will start defining the function here. In pass key, I will say substitute. What is my text phrase? What is my old text English? We've just defined it outside. Then what do I replace new text with? Greek. I will close substitute. And then what do I need to do? Once I have gone through the first iteration, I need to tell this function, go to the next line. How do I tell them to go to a next line? We use a function called offset. Offset says what is the reference. I'm looking at my cell, which is English. Then it says how many rows should I move. If I want to go down, I'll say 1. Or if I want to go down 2 rows, I'll say 2. If I want to go up, I'll say -1. So I'll say go down 1 rows. And then it says how many columns. If I want to go right, I'll say 1. If I want to go left, I'll say -1. But I don't want to change column. I want to stay where I am, and I'll say 0 column. Close. We'll ignore the optional parameters. I will then again say offset, and I will say Greek, because if we've gone 1 English down, we also need to go 1 Greek down. Again the same, go 1 down and no left or right. I will close the offset function and close the other brackets, which is for if and lambda, and I'm going to close this. As expected, it gives me the calc error. Going to copy it and just look at the name once again because it has to be same. This is the name is passkey, and go to define name, and I'm going to say passkey. Copy paste the formula and OK. Now I'm going to delete this and hope that it works. Passkey, my phrase, my English. I'm just going to give 1 here because I want to start with the 1, and then through offset it will go down. And what do I replace 1 in Greek with alpha? And we made a mistake somewhere. Let's go and look at the formula. I'm going to paste the formula here to see where is my mistake. Hopefully we'll be able to spot it easily. Let me put it in this mode. Substitute phrase English geek. All right. Lambda phrase. There is a mistake. I have written eng is equal to space. I don't know why I did not type the whole thing. So I'm going to copy it again and go to name manager, and where is the passkey? I'm going to edit this, select, delete, and press OK. OK, and it works. And as I copy, it works beautifully, except we have some challenge here because 1 doesn't work here, 2 doesn't work here. Rookie mistake. I need to fix the row reference here. And when I copy after that, it works as expected. All right. So in summary, recursive lambda 2 changes. 1, we always need to start with a exit condition. What is the exit condition here? If English is equal to blank, that means when we reach this, we stop calling the function itself. And second, we define the name of the function here before we define in the name manager. All right. This replacement is a very common use of recursive lambda. Another place where this recursive lambda is used extensively is data cleaning. Sometimes when you get data from different systems and you import them in Excel to do some computation, there are a lot of junk characters that come in. Okay, so a lot of people use in cleaning up junk characters. Sometimes you also have situations where there is a mix of numbers and alphabets in the phrases that you have, and they are not separate. You can't use any other formula, text split or something like that. They are mixed, they're garbled. You can use this to remove numbers. In that case, you don't have anything to replace. It's a blank, you replace it with a blank. So these are typical use cases for recursive lambda. All right, so that's about it. We'll pause here. I'm happy to take your questions. Remember, this session is, while it gives you an introduction on how to create your own function, this is also a foundation for a lot of sessions coming in the near future, because a lot of new functions which are absolutely mind-blowing, buy row, buy call, scan, reduce, map, many people haven't even heard of these functions, but these functions use Lambda very, very uh, liberally, and understanding of Lambda is very important. Hello, Sahil. All right, I'm just going to go through the comments to see if I have missed any answering any question. And if I miss saying hello to you personally, hello everyone. And yes, thank you. If you have questions, please drop them. Otherwise, we will close in a few minutes and you all can enjoy your Sunday after that. This file is available in the description. You can download, practice this once. If you've not practiced it right now, you've not been wanting to focus away from the screen and practice side by side, you can practice later. If you have questions, leave in the comments and I will respond to them. And if some of you who know my email ID, you can obviously write to me and I will respond to you. Thank you, Sudeep. I also look forward to these sessions. As I said, we'll take a week's break and we will resume immediately after. Thank you, Akash. All right. It seems no question. Great. Enjoy your weekend and we will meet in 2 weeks' time. Bye bye. Thank you, Sahil.